morning, everyone. I hope you had a chance to enjoy the holiday weekend and spend some time doing something that filled your cup. Whether this is your first time joining us or you've been here from the beginning, I'm really glad you're here. So before we dive in, let's give ourselves a moment to arrive. I want everyone to take a slow breath. Let your shoulders soften. If your mind is still racing through everything waiting for you later today, see if you can give yourself permission to set it down for the next 30 minutes. So, oh, good. I look like I've got a chat working finally. So, before we begin, I have a confession. I use AI to help me organize my ideas, and I have a written expression disorder. I usually know what I want to say, but getting those thoughts onto paper in a way that makes sense is extremely difficult for me. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to become a school psychologist. One of my favorite parts of being a school psychologist was being able to help families understand their child's learning profile and develop strategies to help them be successful. So back to the speech planning. So I give my AI agent an outline, and I ask it to write my speech for me and follow some rules. It was a headache. I thought it kept writing beautiful, polished paragraphs, but it didn't sound like me at all or anyone I knew. And it kept producing patterns of speech and speeches for me that I did not feel right. So I would ask it to redo it with the same rules as before. And it still could not follow the rules. I still thought it was beautiful and polished. Finally, my AI said, I think I have one request. Stop asking me to write sections. Instead, ask me to coach you sentence by sentence. So I took that as a sign from the universe. This speech became more than an exercise in writing. It became an opportunity for me to unmask. So instead of trying to eliminate the fear of being seen, I decided to bring my real voice with me. And so I'm going to try to be confident today. I'm choosing to be seen. And I am afraid of being vulnerable, but I don't want to sound like anyone else. And I want to use my own voice. And that's what I'm choosing to do today. And so I'm taking the power back that I gave my AI agent. And I'm making my decisions for myself today. So to the speech. Before the holiday break, we talked about boundaries. And there was one idea that stayed with me all week. And that's the difference between caring for someone and carrying them. A few days later, someone I care about was having a really difficult day. And I could tell that they needed help. And my first instinct before would have been looking at the situation and going, how can I fix this? But being that I'm in this process of growth, I paused. And I caught myself. And instead of jumping in to solve the problem and offer advice that they might not even want, a question came to my mind that I never asked myself before. Do I have the capacity to help in the way that this person needs today? Is the thought that popped into my head. I'm in the middle of buying a house, and then I have a full-time job, and there's other pressures. I took that pause. The answer I got was, although I wanted to be there for them, I also knew I was getting tired, and I didn't want to push myself into burnout. The old version of me would have ignored that warning sign. And I would have told myself they needed me. I would convince myself I could handle that one little thing. And back then, I would have called that love. I see it differently now. As I got in my car, I realized I wasn't carrying the familiar weight I'd always carried home. The guilt of not being enough never came. And same with the fear of not showing up, did not show up. So I had to be honest. And I was proud of myself. I stayed true to myself and I didn't abandon myself. I couldn't stop thinking about that while I was driving home. And even now, I'd spent so many years taking care of everyone else. And finally, I'd shown myself that same kind of love and care. And like I mentioned, I was very proud of myself. It was a huge milestone for me, and I'm glad to share it with you all. But the only thing that changed that day was the way I understood love. For years, I measured love by how much I was willing to sacrifice. It took me a long time to realize what that belief was costing me. The more I ignored myself, the less connected I felt. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And one question kept showing up. It wasn't doubting how deeply I cared about these people. I was beginning to wonder if I misunderstood what I was feeling. And that question changed where I placed my attention. Instead of focusing on the other person and only on the other person, I became curious about what was happening inside of me. How did I feel after I spent time with that other person? Did I leave feeling more like myself? Or did I leave carrying questions that never seemed to have answers? The more I noticed, the clearer the difference became. Not every relationship was creating the same experience. Maybe I've been calling all of them love simply because I did not have better words. And that's what I'd like to explore here today. As we talk, I invite you to pay attention to more than the ideas. Sometimes the most important insight isn't something we hear. It's something we recognize inside ourselves. So let's get started. Back to that question. What if some of the relationships I called love were actually something different? And I found myself returning to this question for a very long time. It wasn't going away. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was trying to understand other people's behavior. But I needed to turn my attention inward. I needed to become curious about my own experience. And that's when I started noticing something I hadn't seen before. The relationships that stayed on my mind were rarely the ones that I felt the most at peace with. I could spend an entire evening replaying one conversation, and a single text message had the power to lift my mood up or crush me. And when things felt uncertain, I didn't relax until I found an explanation that made me feel better. At that time, I thought those were behaviors that showed I cared deeply. Today, I see it differently. At that time, like I mentioned, I couldn't explain what was happening. I only knew that certain relationships were much harder to walk away from than they should have been. There was a certain pull that I couldn't explain. And I'd even lived through abusive relationships. And even after they ended, I found myself drawn to people who made me question my worth instead of protecting it. That didn't make sense to me. And I really wanted to understand why. Where had I learned this and definition of what love was supposed to feel like? Looking back, the answer wasn't found in one relationship. experiences and the culture around me filled in the rest, and with the music, movies, everyday messages, reinforcing what love is, I somehow believed that fighting harder would prove I loved more. But I never stopped to ask whether it was actually a healthy belief. I accepted that belief that I needed to do more and work harder without questioning it. Eventually, I realized what I've been measuring love with is by the wrong things. I paid attention to chemistry. I noticed excitement. I mistook emotional intensity for emotional closeness. So then I asked myself a different question. How do I feel when I'm with this person? And it was really hard to turn inward again because I'd spent so long focusing on other people, and I wasn't very good at noticing myself. But the more I practiced, the easier it's becoming. I noticed that some conversations left me feeling peaceful. Other conversations with people left me exhausted, even when nothing obvious had gone wrong. I realize now that my body recognizes the difference before my mind does. And now these pieces are starting to slowly fit together. I realize I've been describing very different experiences with the same word. And learning about attachment is giving me a way to understand why. So many years ago, when I first came across the word attachment, probably even in my graduate school studies, I didn't really listen. That word didn't resonate with me. I assumed it described people who became overly dependent on relationships. But the more I realized about attachment, it has very little to do with neediness. It's about what our nervous system comes to expect. As children, none of us decide what feels normal. We learn it. Our experiences quickly teach us what to expect from the people around us. Over time, those expectations become so familiar that we rarely question them. And I had never considered that before. But that's why I kept reacting the way I did. And I had to understand what my nervous system had learned. When someone became distant, I assumed someone had done something wrong. So I tried harder. If a relationship felt uncertain, I believed working harder would bring us closer. And those reactions weren't random. They were developed from my childhood. And this realization brought me an unexpected amount of compassion. I wasn't making those choices because I enjoyed feeling anxious and unsettled. My nervous system was trying to protect me with how it did when I was growing up. The problem was that I couldn't tell the difference between familiar and healthy. Those two things are not always the same thing. And it took me a while to break those patterns. And maybe you've experienced something similar. You knew a relationship wasn't good for you. Leaving still felt incredibly difficult. I understand that feeling. I've lived it. And learning about attachment didn't remove my responsibility. It changed how I understood it. That also meant facing something uncomfortable. I wasn't the only someone who had been hurt. Fear had shaped some of my own behavior too. And there were moments where I reacted from fear instead of security, and people I cared about were affected by it. Looking back, I could see I was repeating patterns I hadn't yet recognized. Understanding where those patterns came from didn't excuse them. It does give me a chance to change them. And I am responsible for what I choose to do with that understanding today. I wasn't responsible for the experiences that taught my nervous system what to fear. And so that's where healing begins. Not by pretending the past didn't matter. I stopped letting my past decide who I would become. And that one shift changed everything. I wasn't responsible for what happened to me. I was responsible for how I heal from it. And learning about attachment didn't remove my responsibility. It gave me the right place to put it. Instead of blaming myself, I became curious about the patterns I had learned. And this curiosity slowly replaced the shame and gave me a new place to begin. Healing wasn't about becoming a different person. It was about helping my nervous system discover that safety could feel different than what it had known before. So as I'm healing, my definition of love is beginning to change. The relationships that once felt exciting, I now feel exhausted around them. And the people that bring consistency, kindness, and peace, I align more with, and I recognize it easier. I haven't changed what I wanted. I have changed what I'm drawn to. So this leaves me with one final question. If healthy love feels different, what does it actually look like? And from the movies and the stories and what the culture shows, I thought healthy love would feel intense. That would sweep me off my feet, that the right person would finally make all the uncertainty worth it. But healing surprised me. The biggest change wasn't who I met. It's how I experience love and care. When I started dating again, I noticed something I had never seen before. Many people describe themselves as securely attached. Before, I did take that at face value. This time, I'm paying attention to how they handle disappointment, respect my boundaries and other people's boundaries, how well they communicate, and how consistent they show up. I realize that calling yourself secure and living with security are not the same thing. Healing changed what I noticed long before it changed who I chose. So if healthy love isn't something someone simply claims, again, what does it look like? So for me, I'm realizing that it's not something I find in another person. It's what happens inside of me. It's when I stop constantly scanning for danger. It's when my mind stops writing stories before I have the facts. Instead of bracing for the worst, I'm staying present in the moment and looking at what's actually happening. The silence in my head feels strange at first. That's because I spent so many years in constant anticipation that I'm realizing that the quiet is one of the strongest signs that I'm healing. And I'm no longer searching for the hidden meaning in someone else's mood. And a delayed text doesn't send me into outer space or self-doubt. I can now see how much of my life was spent reacting to my fears versus understanding the facts. And slowly, my codependent pattern is losing its grip. I'm having more energy, more peace, and more room to simply experience the relationships that are in front of me. I had always assumed healthy relationships meant that there would be very little conflict. However, even with the calm, balanced people, I'm realizing healthy relationships don't avoid disagreements. However, the shift is how they are handled. The calm people that are consistent, that are living securely, are ones that can stay connected, even when they don't agree. A difficult conversation doesn't have to turn into silence, blame, or emotional distance. When a disagreement happens, neither of us handle it perfectly, but we each give each other space when emotions are running high. And then we later come back ready to listen instead of defending. The conversations aren't about winning or proving a point. It's about coming to the level of each other and being curious and understanding each other for the sake of the relationship. When you've got this frame, the disagreement fades from your memory, and what stays with you is the repair. And so another shift happens with this. I view apologies very different this day than I did a year ago. For years, I accepted the words of "I'm sorry" without not paying much attention to what came afterwards. I now know that these are two very different things. An apology acknowledges that something happened. Repair is what restores trust. It shows up in the changed behavior, accountability, and a willingness to reconnect. And that realization changed what I value in a relationship. Chemistry still matters, but character matters more. I pay attention to whether someone's actions make me feel safe enough to be fully myself. I'm no longer looking for someone who never makes mistakes. I'm looking for someone who takes responsibility for them, is accountable, and is willing to repair the connection. That tells me far more than a mistake ever could. We all make mistakes. We're only human. Healing changes the way I care about other people. And for that, before I believed loving someone meant carrying their pain as if it was my own. I thought being supportive meant fixing, rescuing, or sacrificing myself. Love doesn't want you to lose yourself. I can care deeply about someone without taking responsibility for their emotions, their choices, or their healing. And I can stand beside someone without carrying what belongs to them. It was a hard realization, but that hasn't made me love less. It has allowed me to love in a healthier way. A relationship doesn't grow stronger because one person sacrifices themselves. It grows stronger when both people feel safe enough to be fully themselves. And I realize now, looking back, I wasn't looking for love. I was searching for safety. I didn't know the difference then, but I do now. Healthy love doesn't ask me to prove my worth. It gives me the freedom to stop proving it. And that's the moment I knew I wasn't confusing attachment with love anymore. So before we finish, I'd like to leave you with something I'd like for you to think about this week. When you leave here today, life is going to look the same. People around you aren't going to change, but what changes is the way you experience them. When you begin to notice yourself in those moments you would have missed before, that's where I would start. Life quietly offers us opportunities to understand ourselves every day. A conversation that lingers in your mind, a reaction that surprises you. Something feels just a little off, even if you can't explain why. Those moments, I have found, have become some of my greatest teachers. There was a time where I avoided triggers and I brushed feeling off aside. But now I pause, get curious, and listen, and trying to figure out what I'm trying to learn from this. There's usually something worth understanding. And it always goes back to the way that my nervous system has been learning from every experience I've lived through. So looking back, I now have more compassion for my old self than I ever did before. I love her. She's made me who I am today, and I cherish her. I never chose to have those early lessons. None of us do. But what gives me hope is knowing that those early lessons don't have to define the rest of my life. My nervous system learned exactly what it needed for me to do to survive. And it's time to release those beliefs and learn new beliefs that will support and help me thrive. And little by little, what once felt unfamiliar starts to feel like home. And that's what's happening for me now. It's not just one breakthrough. And I'm never going to find the perfect relationship with somebody else. But what I can do is develop the perfect relationship within me. So I'm curious with what stayed with you today. Not the part that agreed with you, but what made you stop and think? If one word comes to mind, put that in the chat. I always love reading what you guys put in the chat. And I appreciate you sharing this time with me today. And more than anything, thank you for being human with me. Every week, you show up with your experiences and your willingness to look honestly at yourself. It takes courage. And I'm proud of you for it. So next week, we're going to explore self-leadership. We're going to talk about what it looks like to become someone you trust, especially when life feels uncertain. And I hope that you'll join me. Until then, take good care of yourself, and I'll see you next week.